Bob Canahan, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much for having me.
Are you satisfied that the Royal Commission is doing a good job?
Well, they're not only doing a good job, but the importance of the Royal Commission was essential to get to the truth of the conspiracy, of the cover-up, of the initial fraud in the first instance that was perpetrated on the AWU. And I'll say this to you and to those that may be watching, that the significance of the Royal Commission was very important to me, because people who have been directly implicated in this scandal, and it is a scandal that's gone all the way to the top, highest office in this land, to a former Prime Minister, Ms Julia Gillard. There's a lot of people that have avoided being questioned by police in various police investigations over the years into this matter, people who have just refused to cooperate with police. The significance of the Royal Commission is people who have failed to cooperate with the police in the past to get to the truth are now compelled to be called and summoned before this Royal Commission. If Justice Dyson Heydon, who is the Chief Commissioner, if he deems it necessary for those people to be called, they will be summoned. They will have no choice. And I say this too, anybody that deliberately misleads this Royal Commission or deliberately lies to the Royal Commission faces severe jail term penalties.
What has been the most compelling evidence given so far?
The compelling evidence? Well, the initial fraud that was perpetrated on the AWU, it was a scandal. It was orchestrated in the first instance by the then branch secretary, Mr Bruce Wilson, here in Western Australia, where it was a false entity was created through his, with the assistance of his then girlfriend, Miss Julia Gillard, who was then a junior salaried partner with Slater and Gordon at the time. They were in a personal relationship at the time. Ms Gillard was performing work to the principal client. The AWU was a client of Slater and Gordon back then. So Ms Gillard was performing work for the AWU and being billed for that work, or the AWU was being billed for the work that she was doing, but at the same time she was doing and providing her then boyfriend with free legal advice on various matters, including the establishment of this false entity which has created and resulted in this Royal Commission.
What was the main thrust of your evidence?
The main thrust of the evidence is this. Ian Cambridge, who's now with Fair Work Australia, was the National Secretary of the AWU back in 1994, 1995. When these matters were first brought to the attention of Mr Cambridge, through exhaustive efforts conducted by Mr Cambridge on behalf of the members of the union, Mr Cambridge was able to source a number of quite a number of significant documents from banks, various other institutions, including here in Western Australia, which ultimately resulted in the discovery of this false entity. There are other areas that this Royal Commission is investigating in terms of Mr Wilson's corrupt activity, and that's what I describe it as, fraudulent corrupt activity. But essentially, the focus at the moment that the Royal Commission is focusing on in terms of the Australian Workers' Union component of this Royal Commission investigation is the false entity that was created here in Western Australia, that Ms Gillard assisted her then boyfriend, Mr Bruce Wilson, to create, with no reporting to the AWU, the only paying principal client. She saw fit, for whatever reason, to assist the boyfriend to create this false entity.
Being a whistleblower is never easy. What prompted you to come forward, and how did it cost you?
Well, what prompted me to come forward, it's a very, very basic principle. My parents taught me right from wrong when I was a toddler. I learned right from wrong more so when I went to kindergarten. It's not rocket science. So that was my driving motivation. I was also the president of the AWU back in those days, in 1995. I was president of the Victorian branch, and being president, you are a senior officer of a registered organisation. And being a senior officer in a registered organisation, you have to abide by the rules of that registered organisation. And quite clearly, you have obligations, not just moral obligation, you have legal obligations, fiduciary duty to discharge on behalf of the members that you've been elected to represent. Now, that was my driving motivation and remains so today.
How are the former Prime Minister Julia Gillard and the opposition leader Bill Shorten implicated in these issues?
Well, Ms Gillard, as I said previously, she was the boyfriend and she assisted in creating a false entity through devious illegal means, which this Royal Commission will finally get to the bottom of. Mr Shorten and I have a history. I was responsible for bringing Bill Shorten into the Australian Workers Union. In about 1992, he was my campaign manager in a campaign that I was involved in at the time against Bruce Wilson for elected positions in the union. So Bill and I went back a long way. When I became aware of the extent of this fraud, I went to Bill Shorten. Clearly I had no support from anybody else, any other senior official in the union other than Ian Cambridge. And I thought I would go and see my protege. And I'm not being a smart aleck by referring to that. He was my protege when I brought him into the union. Bill Shorten knew as much as I did in 1997 when I approached him and told him that I was going to the police and, you know, this just isn't good enough. Bill, his words to me at the time, and they are indelibly etched in my mind, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Bob, think of your future, mate. Think of your future. You'll be going to the State Parliament in Victoria shortly." There was a seat which I was working on personally to be elected to. So that part of what he was saying to me was correct. And he said, if you pursue this, a lot of good people are going to get hurt. Well, when Bill said that to me, I was shattered, to be quite frank. And I walked away from that discussion knowing full well that there was no longer a parliamentary career for me. And back in those days, I had no idea then that it was going to take nearly 20 years of my life to get this story out to where it is now in front of a Royal Commission.
What questions do they need to answer?
Ms Gillard and Mr Wilson? Well, Mr Wilson's evidence to date, I'm sure, gives rise to far more further questions to be answered than what his evidence gives rise to a lot more questions that he must answer, in my opinion, because, quite frankly, his evidence to me, it's up to the Commission to determine this, but from my own personal opinion, there are further questions he's got to answer. Ms Gillard, for her part, I'm sure she's sitting back watching this with interest. In fact, I know she's watching it with interest. She has legal counsel representing her in these proceedings. She has not appeared herself yet. It's my expectation, it's only my expectation, nobody has told me this. The Commission will determine who and when they call. But Ms Gillard must come forward and give evidence. And that will happen in two ways. Firstly, if she has any sense of duty and credibility at all, that she believes she still may have, any shred of credibility, she must volunteer to come forward and explain herself and her role. The second option is she will be subpoenaed, and she should be subpoenaed by the Commission to answer some serious questions that have been levelled at her going back to those days and the corruption that she, as a legal person, that she assisted to perpetrate on innocent Australian members of the Australian Workers Union. So those questions must be answered.
Are they compelled to give evidence? They
are compelled to give evidence. And as I said before, if anybody, doesn't matter if it's a former Prime Minister or Bob Kernahan, just a nobody, I never went into Parliament, I'm a nobody. But if I mislead or tell lies to this Commission, similarly, if Ms Gillard or anybody else lies or misleads, they face jail penalties. Very serious. Not to be laughed at.
Is Kevin Rudd also likely to appear?
Kevin Rudd? Well, again, that's up to the Commission to determine. I don't know what material the Commission may have, but in terms of what I know about these matters, I don't believe, insofar as the Australian Workers Union component of this investigation by the Royal Commission is concerned, I have no evidence in all these years of Mr Rudd having any involvement.
prominent union and the labour figures have labelled the Royal Commission a Liberal government witch hunt to torpedo the union movement and the ALP. You know, do they have the case?
There's no case there. That's a case that is supported. It has implicit support from media organisations like the taxpayer-funded ABC, who have just failed to report the facts on this matter over the years, and not just the ABC, but Fairfax here in Australia. They're equally as culpable. Through their inaction in reporting the facts, they've played a substantial role in the cover-up of this fraud, which has seen people like Bill Shorten, Nicola Roxon, Stephen Conroy, David Feeney. There are others there, but most importantly, it allowed the top office of this land to be occupied by somebody that, in my opinion, has been involved in a serious fraud that was never properly investigated. And if it had been properly investigated way back then, in my opinion, Ms Gillard and some of those others would never, ever have got into Parliament, let alone held senior positions on Ms Gillard's front bench at cabinet positions, determining the future of this country. It is outrageous.
How serious is union corruption in Australia?
Well, I think it's very serious. I think the construction industry for years has been corrupt. It's not just unions either. There's some employers out there that have serious questions to answer. It's the small contractors, the small businesses in this country that have suffered due to the well, I call it corrupt activities of certainly unions, but some of those key construction industry employers are equally as guilty. And this commission will find out who those culprits are. I've got great confidence that that'll happen.
Now, Bob, I understand that you were attacked. What was the experience?
Oh, a very unpleasant experience, an experience I still live to this day. I don't live in fear, but I live with a very mindful presence of keeping a low profile, as it were. But I'm finding myself more and more able to be far more open and talk to people such as yourself about this matter, because Justice Dyson Heydon made it very clear in the preliminary opening of this Royal Commission that whistleblowers will be protected, and that any attempt to abuse, any attempt to induce witnesses will be met with the full weight of the law. So I was pleased about that, but in the late 1990s, when I was pursuing this matter, I was very active in the media, and that resulted in me receiving a warning in the way of a bashing, which resulted in me being hospitalised, having various treatment for serious bruising. Initial examinations, they thought I had a cracked skull. It was pretty serious stuff. And it's an experience I never want to live again. Certainly, I never want to live in real time again. I live it with every day of my life at the moment, mentally.
Did that experience haunt you?
Oh yeah, it still haunts me to this day. I'm not haunted by the same thing happening in real time to me again. I'm quite relaxed about the comments by Justice Dyson Heydon, in comments he made about the protection that will be provided to whistleblowers, people like myself and Cathy Jackson, where severe penalties will be handed out to anybody that is found to be intimidating or threatening or trying to induce witnesses, whistleblowers particularly, to keep a low profile during these proceedings. I currently live in central Victoria. I guard my privacy these days until the end of this Royal Commission at least, when hopefully there'll be some closure on this for me. I can then start to try and live the rest of my life, the years that I have left in my life. Yeah, I'd rather not discuss exactly where I live at the moment. It's quite a secure location. I'm quite happy where I am at the minute.
Bob Cunningham, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.